Dallas Cowboys fans, welcome to What to Expect. This is our fourth episode of our film breakdown series where we dive into team-specific offensive and defensive units, and on today's list we have none other than one of the nastiest defenses in football, the Dallas Cowboys defense. Before we dive into the film, take a look at how we format these episodes to ensure that you're following along and understanding every step necessary, which will bring us to our final conclusion at the end of the video of what to expect. Now, diving into these stats, and understand that with these stats, there are some hidden takeaways beyond these numbers, but they will serve as our baseline to assist in building familiarity with this defense. As we can see in the bottom right corner, number 6th in scoring defense at 19.7 points allowed per game, and number 13th in total defense at 332.2 yards allowed per game. Now getting into the rushing stats for the rush defense, number 22 in yards allowed per game at 124.4. Tied for 15th in yards per attempt at 4.4, and number 16th in first downs allowed at 6.8 per game. These are some things we have to fix, but we're going to talk about how exactly did they do that with the film. Getting into the pass defense, number 8th in yards per game at 207.8, tied for 6th in yards per attempt at 6.1, and number 4 in sacks per game at 3.1. We know this is a team who loves to get after the passer, but there are some very specific things I want to get into regarding these stats, specifically the rush defense and how those numbers are a reflection of some technical things that will be shown in the film. However, let's finish our final task of housekeeping by touching on some of the notable offseason moves made by the Dallas Cowboys. Here are ESPN's list of transactions made by the Cowboys since the end of the 2022 season, and truth be told, the Cowboys aren't really a team who builds through the free agency period. But I'd like to add that the re-sign of Jonathan Hankins, which is awkwardly listed 3 times, and the trade for Stephon Gilmore are power moves in my opinion. Let's shift over to what the Cowboys do to build their teams best as we look at their 2023 draft class. Focusing on our defenders that we drafted, we have defensive tackle Mozzie Smith, linebacker Demarion Overshown, defensive end Viliami Fehoko, and cornerback Eric Scott Jr. I like that the Cowboys touched on all 3 levels of the defense, and I do want to add that I like the potential of all of these players. Before this video, we will mainly focus on what Mozzie Smith brings and why I think an ultra-athletic linebacker like Demarion Overshown could shine in certain situations early. And with that point, the table is set. NFL fans, let's roll the tape. So to prevent anyone from becoming lost in the film process, let's quickly assess Dan Quinn's base scheme, which is a 4-3 system. I don't like to heavily weigh what defensive coordinators in particular have done in the past because the NFL changes so rapidly that these coordinators change with it. Now, what if I told you on short notice to scratch 4-3 out of your mind because like I've said on multiple occasions, almost every team runs a hybrid nickel 4-2-5 package. And for the Cowboys, they even have an exotic dime package which they love to run. Now, I don't keep third level stats, but I can tell you that out of all of the games that I watched, the Dallas Cowboys run cover 2 variations more than any other coverage. This is usually second and long, third and long, bread and butter for this team. And they do a great job of disguising the look in different situations. The simplistic way in which I've come to view cover 2 and Tampa 2 is essentially covering with the rush and rushing with the coverage. Now, Daryl, how do you cover with the pass rush and pass rush with coverage? Let's take a look at this play here. The Vikings come out in a 3-by-1 look in an obvious passing situation. There are obvious coverage indicators here based on alignment of our safeties, and as the play rolls, we'll see that the boundary corner never opens up as he has the flat responsibility. Now, there are some key things here which I like by Dan Quinn. As the play rolls, let's focus on Trayvon Diggs and Kyron Brown. Brown is in press alignment and Diggs is lined up in the slot. When Kirk Cousins drops his back foot, not only is Javon Curse in a great position splitting both the dig and the post, notice how Trayvon Diggs, an established ball hawk, is biting down into that hook zone. And for Kirk Cousins, there's absolutely no way he can fire that ball into that window. So that means the slant on my backside, basically my third read in the progression, should be open. Well, not necessarily, because of the fact that Brown was in press alignment and also has no other work in the flat, so he too can make a play on the ball if he was to throw that. Too much to digest in one play, meet Michael Parsons. So yeah, we pass rush with coverage, but did we really? Let's take a look at this play from the inside view. Although we know now that Curse will be running the pole in Tampa 2, his slight mug in the A-gap shows that the Cowboys at least partially respect the run if it were to happen on this play. But remember, When I said that as soon as Kirk Cousins tries to move on from that dig in the middle of the field, it was too late. That's because an elite pass rusher like Micah Parsons makes this thing go. Pay attention to him here and notice that as soon as Kirk Cousins pats the football, Mike already obliterated his matchup with the violent rip move to the inside. So while we used our coverage to pass rush, the pass rush only needed this specific Tampa 2 look to break down Kirk Cousins' progressions because we trust that Micah Parsons will get home. And that is truly an indicator of rushing with the coverage and covering with the rush. Now, cover 3 and cover 1 were almost used at somewhat equal amount, with the very slight nod going to cover 3, but the common denominator between those two coverages were what? A single high safety which can send down an extra box defender. And what I really focused on in this approach was with Dan Quinn back out of heavy doses of cover 1 when Anthony Brown tore his Achilles in week 13. The short answer was no. I really like the idea of just letting these corners play because of the fact that it was a talented secondary and because of the pass rush as well. If you were going to consistently beat the man coverage looks of the Cowboys, you honestly deserve to win the game. There was no secret in the fact that getting behind in the game or getting in obvious pass rush situations against the Dallas Cowboys was an absolute death wish. And with that being said, that leads me into discussing some of the run plays because while it wasn't as consistent as Dan Quinn would like, there were some guys who stepped up on early downs to let the pass rush eat. Let's look at this play here. The Detroit Lions are trying to pin and pull with their center and right guard, while Penei Sewell and now Minnesota Viking TJ Hawkinson serve as the pin guys. However, the Dallas Cowboys say no. Watch Carlos Watkins and DeMarcus Lawrence work together on this play to absolutely stuff it. This allows the backside pursuit to squeeze down the cutback alley and make this tackle for no gain at all. And watching this defense, I got the feeling that this team was really built for the defensive line to be the run game playmakers rather than soaking up gaps for linebackers to run free, but sometimes it was the opposite. Right here is an example of a great play by Leighton Vander Esch, staying patient as he gets the motion across the formation. He bumps down to respect it, but at the snap of the ball, he doesn't find himself overflowing out of his gap. Instead, once he sees the bloodbath of a battle between his defensive front versus the Vikings, he patiently mirrors the flow before the back becomes clear, then he hits it downhill to make the play. Need more of this specifically out of him. And there's another play I'd like to add because the way these safeties play the run, it gives you not only the versatility to consistently field this nickel package, but with Kearse and Wilson, I also feel more comfortable than I would running dime packages. Let's take a look here. First off, we have really tight splits between guard, center, guard. But the Texans are going to run the basic inside zone. We see that the Cowboys have 8 run defenders in the box, but focus on Donovan Wilson. As the play side B gap shows, he shoots through the open gap as if it was a common theme for him at this position. The reason that this is so important for this defense is that on this channel, we've watched a lot of film and we've seen some really bad safety fits. So the fact that the Cowboys have 2 very sound run defenders and Wilson and Kearse is a special thing that also helps their coverage. Now, we all saw the divisional game against the 49ers, and the reason I'm referring to this game is that the Cowboys have very dominant defensive outputs on film. Earlier, we talked about their inconsistencies when stopping the run, and before we dive into what I believe were some of those weaknesses, I do want to acknowledge the secondary by saying that it would truly be nitpicking and a waste of your time by talking about certain weaknesses within the DB room because they were the 8th pass defense and played their tails off even amongst injuries. When we saw this team getting beat through the air, it was either a soft spot in the coverage or the receiver just won the rep with his route. But there weren't any quote-unquote true weaknesses I wanted to harp on with this group. And trading for Stephon Gilmore, whose claim to fame was as a man corner, he makes this team a prime candidate for a top 5 pass defense. However, when you want to run 2 high safety looks predominantly and even cover 1 man, you must have a fierce front 7 to combat the loss of extra box defenders. The Dallas Cowboys wanted to add to that. Let's take a look at this play. We see that the Cowboys are in this 2 high look at the top of your screen, and noticing the blocking scheme, shout out to George Kittle for an amazing seal, but the defensive line, this is not good enough. Pay attention to Carlos Watkins and Jonathan Hankins, specifically Hankins as he gets pinned down inside here by Mike McGlinchey before trying to get back outside and eventually pancaked. Credit to Hankins as he came in the latter half of the season and actually helped the run defense, but on this play, it's just a tough rep and a free 6 yards. Going over to this play here in another 2 high safety look, let's focus on the linebackers. The Commanders are running a wide zone scheme, and watch as their running back does a great job of pressing the line of scrimmage. The first thing we may think is that Anthony Barr is over pursuing the fast flow and allowing the team to get gashed through the cutback alley. Well, not necessarily. At the snap of the ball, a linebacker Damone Clark finds himself dropping into coverage without reading run or pass. And this was a theme amongst all of these linebackers truly. While they were all good and violent when they trusted their keys, when they played fast, the odds were way too inconsistent across this linebacker core. And another play I want to show before I make this staggering point, let's start from Neville Gallimore and progress backwards in discussing the importance of having a solid anchor and winning the leverage battle. Right here, Micah Parsons is already out of the play because he's aligned so tight to the line of scrimmage that he truly can't read the play. This is nothing but a simplistic zone scheme other than the fact that Christian Watkins is lined up as a wing. But right here, take a look at how Leighton Vander-Esch is darn if he does, darn if he doesn't. Yes, if he chooses the strong side A gap, Trayvon Diggs is in the B gap, but Diggs is not a natural part of the run fit. He's really more so an extra guy who could make the play, so you can't bank on that. So because his defensive tackle isn't creating any pushback, it creates indecisiveness for the linebacker, and as you can see, he doesn't really choose any gap at all. And at the top, we can see that Malik Hooker pursues the run perfectly, but he negates all of this because he's undisciplined in his angle, losing the leverage battle, and eventually missing this tackle. So when I talk about the run game, I showed these plays because I wanted to show how all three levels kind of affect each other to a certain degree. A key stat that I found was in the Cowboys' 5 losses. They gave up 138.6 yards to running backs alone, excluding quarterback scrambles. I would note that the Cowboys can improve their perimeter run defense against wide zones and jet sweeps. The heart of the run defense starts in the middle though. When I talk about Mazi Smith, I think he was indeed the right pick when you miss out on a Dalton Kincaid who would have been a nice pick as well, not even in just the 2 high sets but in general. I think he's a guy who of course can be a nose tackle in this scheme, but I think he could also be the long-term answer right here from day one, being the guy who can 2-gap, anchor against doubles, and get to a point where he wreaks consistent havoc in the backfield. This was a defense who had elite stretches, but the fact that they addressed their weaknesses at all 3 levels makes me believe that this will be an elite 2023 defense. And I do not use that word lightly. I love what has been done, and I'm optimistic about what a Demarion Overshown can do in this scheme as well. I believe he can run the pole and also cover running backs out of the backfield, but if there was a concern, for me it would still be the linebacker room. Training camp will be essential for this group as my eyes will be on Damone Clark and Jabril Cox as my top 2 candidates to go alongside Vander-Esch. But the goal is very clear. Mazi Smith in the first round exacerbates the fact that the Cowboys want to be able to stop the run from both 2 and single high safety sets, get into 3rd down, and release the pass rush demons. The NFC East is now on notice, and it's time to play ball. Chicago Bears fans, welcome to What to Expect. This is the first episode of the brand new series where we focus on a team-specific offensive or defensive unit, and today's unit in which we're turning our focus to